Welcome to the Greek Scientists Society Second Symposium. Discover the way a Greek scientific paradigm may develop an innovation ecosystem 5.0.
Ωραία.
So, welcome back to our next second session on how is technology expected to disrupt the innovation landscape and which technological trends will define the human-centric Greek ecosystem. Our speakers for this session is Professor Joseph Sifakis, who is Emeritus Senior CNRS Researcher at Bertsimas Laboratory and also the holder of the Turing Award of 2007. He is also a Grand Officer of the French National Order of Merit.
Professor Dimitris Bertsimas, who is the Boeing Leaders for Global Operations Professor of Management, a Professor of Operations Research, and the Associate Dean for the Master of Business Analytics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 2005, Prof. Bertsimas was elected a member of the National Academy of Engineering.
Next, we have Professor Efthimios Kaxiras, who is John Hasbrouck Van Vleck Professor of Pure and Applied Physics, and also Chair of the Department of Physics at Harvard University.
And finally, we have Michail Bletsas, who is the Director of Computing and a research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Media Lab. Since 2010, he is an independent non-executive director of the Hellenic Telecommunications Organization, OTE. Last but certainly not least, the moderator of this session is Professor Haris Makatsoris, who is Professor of Sustainable Manufacturing Systems in the Department of Engineering at King's College London. He is also the London Director of the Centrillion Technology Limited Centre. And Prof. Makatsoris, thank you for being here today. We now hand over to you to start this discussion.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Just to put the session into context, which is really, if I could distill what the session is about, is really about finding out, discussing the trends that will shape a Greek human-centric innovation ecosystem. And there's a lot of implications to that, which I very much hope we'll be exploring in the session today. So just to frame the discussion a little bit, some of us, well, definitely me, I'm nearly 100 years old, so I very distinctively remember around 2000 all the euphoria in the Greek stock market. And there was a talk that Greece was to become Europe's Silicon Valley, or at least, in Attica, there were very ambitious plans to invest and set up centers to support spin-outs and a software kickstart the Greek software industry at that time. Then, unfortunately, the dot-com crash came. The Greek stock market crash followed shortly after, and things went really, really quiet since then. And that was, the pretty much the end of it was the crash of 2008. Then, almost in parallel, we have been seeing our neighboring countries. Bulgaria, for example, had attracted a lot of investment from big European software companies like SAP with the establishment of a research center there. Israel is now one of the leading countries pretty much in the startup scene, with various technology startup companies attracting significant funding and getting a lot of traction in global markets. So the question really is, where is Greece right now? Where are we? What is the innovation ecosystem currently? And who are the key actors that should be activated, become more active, or they are there and that they need a lot more exposure to get things moving again from Greece? So on that topic, may I ask Professor Sifakis to give us a bit of an overview before we explore the topic a little bit further. Professor Sifakis.
Yes. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Very well.
So thank you for this introduction. It's a pleasure to talk about innovation, although it's a very old story in Greece, and we've been talking for years about this perspective of a national innovation strategy in Greece. I think the discussion, in this discussion, it is very important to understand how innovation can be developed and what are the preconditions for building an innovation-driven economy. I would like to say a few words about innovation ecosystems, at least how I understand the concept. Of course, innovation is the process that leads to the creation of new products and services that we understand. It's a complex process involving, in my opinion, three types of players that synergize in what we call an innovation ecosystem: big companies, centers of excellence, and startups. And each of these players has a specific role. Big companies bring funding and new problems. Centers of excellence bring basic research, skills, and knowledge. And finally, startups are the lightweight structures that are able to effectively transform innovative results into products and services. Now, an innovation ecosystem is very important because it's a stable structure. It's a self-sustainable structure. It relies on a virtuous cycle that sustains and reinforces this symbiosis and collaboration between the players. So the centers of excellence get extra resources from industry. At the same time, they enrich the research portfolio. And of course, industry avoids risks and costs of basic exploratory research and focuses on applications and proof of concept. Now, the question is how we can build innovation ecosystems in Greece, and I think the answer comes directly from the definition I gave. We need the three types of players, the three ingredients. To be short, I will focus on centers of excellence because this is very important. I will talk about my personal experience as a president of the National Council of Research and Technology. What is a center of excellence? It's an entity that provides leadership, best practices, research, support, and training for a focus area. And for me, a center of excellence characterized by two things. One is critical mass. We need critical mass because in order to have breakthroughs in R&D today, you need multidisciplinary knowledge and the research substantiated by experimental evidence. So we require a combination of skills spanning from basic to applied research and development. So from my own experience, as I said, as the president of the National Council for Research and Technology, there is a problem of fragmentation of the Greek research landscape. There is also a problem of relevance and that lack of connection to real economy, and this should be recognized. I think that the available research potential should be restructured, for instance, on a regional basis to create regional centers of excellence with strong governance and very focused activities by defining priorities. The other thing that characterizes Center of Excellence is excellence, of course, and I think that in our universities we should change the criteria for recruitment, promotion, and evaluation to take into account relevance and applicability of results. The workforce market is global. Research and academic careers should become more attractive. We cannot retain in the country high-value researchers with poor salaries in a bureaucratic, rigid, and unfair system. Finally, I would like to emphasize the importance of openness and international collaboration with the best research centers abroad. It's a pity that no specific measures have been taken to foster collaboration with the huge academic potential of the Greek diaspora. And as a president of this council, we had made proposals that cannot be accepted by any of the parties at the time. So from a more general perspective, I will finish here. I think that the governments should consider R&D and innovation as top priorities, which is not the case today. And they should strengthen technology engineering in all levels of education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sifakis. I would like to follow up a little bit on the comments that you have raised. I mean, if we look at what happens in other major economies, in the UK, for example, but pretty much in the US, and the other speakers, of course, will have a lot more to say about that than I do. But then we see that there is a lot of infrastructure there to support the establishment of innovative companies, and then there are very clear routes to markets. In Greece, what is the state of the current infrastructure that we have to support such efforts? And I'm thinking about the government structures and government organizations like our Inland Revenue, Euphoria, and how would these organizations could contribute in the future? How could they perhaps be restructured to enable the ecosystems we're talking about? So this is on one side. That's what the government structures are there now, and what the government structures should look like in the future to have to actually claim that we have a competitive innovation ecosystem. And on the other side is the Greek market itself. What is the appetite for the Greek market to take on the risk to adopt new technologies coming from Greek startups? And I wonder if you, Professor Sifakis, or any of the other speakers, or maybe the audience could contribute to these points.
Of course, I could contribute, but perhaps, okay, I think that what we are lacking in Greece is a national strategy, a vision about how to bring research close to economy, and how also to facilitate all the transfer of results. And I think the focus should not be only the interaction with the local industry, but should be much more open. I think that we have a very good research potential, but the problem is how to structure it and how to connect it to real problems.
Absolutely.
So there are reforms to be undertaken. I can speak later. In the interest of time, I will stop here.
Absolutely, routes to market and establishing the infrastructures there to have these routes to market is absolutely important, and also the kind of the support mechanisms, because I mean, what is like starting up a new technology business in Greece that is not going to have a revenue for at least 2 to 3, maybe 5 years, even depending on what technology is about, and would be sustaining itself through private investment. I mean, how would Greek public organizations like the Inland Revenue would view or would understand this kind of model? Is there anybody perhaps in the audience who would be able to help us with this point and provide views? Or any of the other speakers on the panel, perhaps? Professor Bletsas?
No professor, and not anymore at Hellenic Telecom Organization. But yes, I can say a few things. First of all, we like in Greece to say what a nice, what a productive research ecosystem we have. And yes, it is quite productive on a per capita paper production. However, if we see our patent applications, we are at the bottom of the European Union right now. And we have been there for a very long time. And unlike people who say that we need to be there because we don't have the other essential components of an innovation ecosystem, which is large companies, for example, to be immediate recipients of that research, of those research results. We have this other country which went through a similar process like ours, which is called Portugal. Similar one to ours, which has been going up. And it's actually started at about where we have been at the beginning of the crisis, and now it's double. Their European patent applications are double ours. So one can say, how can we work on that? How we can make those results, how we can improve on that index. And to tie to what the previous panel said and what Professor Sifakis alluded to, when you have such a multitude of research organizations, of all small research organizations in Greece, you cannot have the support that researchers require, for example, to make patent applications. A very simple example. So this multitude of universities, this multitude of research organizations, very, very small organizations, which lack resources at every level of their operation, creates effects like that and doesn't allow Greece to become a major player or be shown at the map of innovative countries. And I think that, I do believe that we have the human capital, but we are not developing that human capital. I mean, if I want to tie it to the previous panel, to the message from the previous panel, you cannot have a 5.0 innovation ecosystem with a 1.50 educational system, which is where we are. But we need to really look at what other places are doing correctly and just copy those best practices. And, patents is one very good example of what we can do.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on this theme also, if I may. And I think a key ingredient is what Michalis just mentioned. I don't think you can have innovation without a world-class higher education system, which couples very closely to the research centers that Professor Sifakis mentioned very eloquently a moment ago. And we are not at that level. Our higher education system, I don't think, can be claimed to be at a world-class level. And we have lost precious time in arriving at that level because the potential is there, as already mentioned. The human capital is there. But the human capital by itself cannot thrive if it doesn't have the right conditions. And one of the strong cards that Greece has in this respect is the Greek scientific diaspora. It was already mentioned, but I think it's worth pointing out some key aspects of this. It's not that the diaspora exists, it's also that it's quite successful and it's actively interacting with the Greek Educational and Research Center, or at least tries to make that interaction real. So we need more mechanisms and infrastructure to take advantage of this strong card that Greece has. And in fact, this motivated me and several colleagues, including my co-panelist here, Professor Dimitris Bertsimas, to actively pursue such an effort to develop channels and mechanisms for closer collaboration with our peers in Greece. We call this effort the Hellenic Institute for Advanced Studies, and I'm happy to talk more if there's interest. But there's also some impediments. And I think the bad news is, as I mentioned, that we have lost time. And in many ways, in my opinion, there is the Greek state does not facilitate these efforts. The Greek state does not have to be the only player, but it is a key player, and it has to provide means and infrastructure for these efforts to succeed. And in some ways, the Greek state is actually acting as a breaker, like a retarding force rather than an accelerating force. And I will make very clear here that I'm talking about the state, not the current government. There is a difference, and I think we need to be making sure that we differentiate the two. I'd like to mention, incidentally, that a country which is making a very aggressive effort in the last couple of years to both build up its higher education system and to take advantage of and even build its own diaspora is our neighbor to the east and biggest adversary at the moment. So finally, I want to make one other quick comment, which was alluded to already. And I think another key ingredient for innovation to thrive is a stable and efficient justice system and legal framework. And here again, the Greek state really needs to meet the challenges of the modern world. And it's not at that level. And without this kind of legal framework, which can resolve disputes fairly and quickly and facilitate the protection of intellectual output, I don't think we can go very far in terms of innovation. And I'm not an expert in this area, but I have the distinct impression that the Greek legal framework is not to par with modern expectations, and we need to work on this.
These are excellent points by both speakers. Thank you very much. And these points actually serve a segue to the next point. So we talked a lot so far about education and in fact about the universities. And Greek universities actually have been really good over the last 20, maybe more years or so, to secure funding from the European Union, like the Horizon 2020 program, which is the most recent one, of course, and taking advantage of the position Greece has with respect to its nature as a smaller country. So, of course, not to the extent as other countries, obviously. And I know Professor Sifakis looks like he disagrees with me. I know Portugal has done really well, but nevertheless, Greece has been successful in obtaining funding. But then the question is, what do we do with the funding? What comes next? How does the outputs of that research find its way into perhaps more research and more application? And could I ask Mr. Bletsas to give us his views on that topic, in particular in the area of software, which Greece has been quite good at that to a large extent.
As with everything else, and I think software is a very good way to actually, connect what we are saying, and we all feel very strongly, for example, about the educational system to the title of our session, which is which technologies we should focus on. And I would say, yes, focus on software, but focus on software means different things to different people. And to me, focus on software means how to work on actually making software more efficient in the various application sectors. So it doesn't mean creating more computer science schools necessarily, although that wouldn't be bad. We don't have that many. But actually, incorporating computing on every scientific endeavor. And this is something that is a big challenge everywhere. That's why MIT, for example, made the College of Computing right now to bring computer scientists and scientists together to work on the problems that computing can solve. So this points to a lot of other pathogenies, if you want, of the Greek educational system. We confuse education with professional training. Learning how to program in a specific language is not part of a university curriculum and shouldn't be part of a university curriculum. MIT doesn't have a programming per se course. I mean, it uses programming in many courses. So that's what should happen in all industries. And we return back to the same thing. Software is about human capital. It's not about hard, capital investments. And how do you develop human capital? We know how do we develop human capital by having a good educational system, but also you need to have all these other institutional support that is required for that innovation, for those seeds, for example, that you are going to plant to grow and produce fruit. So I think we should focus on software, but we should focus on a more holistic way. I think Dimitris wants to say something here.
Is it okay, Harry?
Please, by all means.
Yeah, I would like to give you a concrete example of how I believe universities can improve the environment of entrepreneurs for innovation. In my home university, MIT, we have launched a couple of years ago the so-called engine. The engine, its aim is to try to bridge the gap between discovery and commercialization by empowering sort of disruptive technologies with capital, knowledge, network connections, special equipments, and labs. So the idea is that faculty and students that are founders have office space, access to capital, access to labs, access to equipment. And then when they are ready to exit the engine and go to the world, there's connections with forms of capital. It's a young effort. I have observed some of my students participating, and so far I have seen it to be quite strong. The key here is inside the university. I have some experiences with the Greek education environment in 2013, 2016, and I would say in terms of talent, the university has high quality talent. But this talent, in terms of, it's one thing to try to bring grants to the university from Europe, but it's a very different thing to utilize some of this innovation that happens to make it useful to society, as well as creating wealth for the university, the innovators, and the country. So I would recommend looking at this model. And another model, which is later in the system, we don't have it yet in Greece, is a so-called technology licensing office, in which technologies that are developed within the universities are licensed to the world. This also creates appropriate wealth for the innovators, for the university, and society at large. These are one concrete way that the universities can contribute.
Professor Bertsimas, you raise points which are very important, and I'm quite familiar with those. Actually, having gone through the process here in the UK several times. So can I ask you on that point, right? Establishing procedures inside universities to take innovations to market is obviously very important, and it is one thing. I think we have lost Dimitris, but I will carry on. The next thing is, how can we ensure that there is a route to market from that point onwards? What kind of infrastructure we require to make sure that innovations do not just transfer from the university to some legal entity, but finds its way all the way to the market and to the end use? That is number one. And the second question, Professor Bertsimas, Dimitris, we lost you there for a minute.
Unfortunately, I did not listen. My connection is not so good, so
right.
Okay,
no worries. I'm going to repeat. I carried on, but I'm going to repeat. So, having a technology transfer office in the university is fundamental in making sure that innovations do find their way into market, but that's one component. So where the technology transfer office stops is when the technology has found its way into some legal entity, but then there is an awful lot of steps further downstream to make this technology actually commercially viable, accessible, and find its way to market. And there's two components to that. What infrastructure we need following from that point onwards, number one, and number two, what strategies we might need to de-risk access to innovation, especially in the Greek context.
That's a complex question with many components. I would say, from my experience as an entrepreneur myself, an ingredient, a significant ingredient, is to have, in addition to ideas, products, you need people with experience with the markets. Right. And I would say this can be provided typically by an advisory board, a board of directors who can appropriately guide the company into the right markets. But as I mentioned before, the engine has these components in that when the company, and in terms of products, is ready to launch, there is capital, there is advice, there are elements to help it grow. And I would say, if you look at the environments, the technologies have been successful. They are very, the Silicon Valley is one, Israel is another one. The Route 128 near where I live is one. So concatenating areas where expertise exists typically gives rise to global growth. And it has been my observation that, let's say, the city of Austin in Texas, that has an ecosystem being developed, there's percolation of companies that help each other. I have personal experience on these matters. So these are some elements, not a complete answer to what is a very important question, but definitely they can help in this direction. Finally, I cannot overemphasize what Efthimios mentioned about the legal system. I also have some experience in Greece, and the legal system regarding entrepreneurship and new companies is, I'm afraid, backwards. In other words, instead of helping, the bureaucracy is such that is a hindrance to progress. I would say the state needs to put significant effort on that, because without the appropriate legal framework and ease of joining, I don't think we'll be successful. In the US, it takes roughly a day to form a company. In Greece, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is an important point, and I'm going to give the floor to Efthimios first, and then
yes, I'd like to make some comments building on what my colleague Dimitris just mentioned, and as we're all in complete agreement. I think the legal system really needs a serious reform, and this is actually the only thing that only the state can do this. And this is really important. However, in the other aspects that have been discussed, I believe maybe this is a somewhat optimistic view, but I believe if there is a lot of potential there and human capital is properly employed, there will be the pressure to create these conditions for companies to thrive or to expand and so on by the young entrepreneurs and by the highly educated and highly capable people who try to push for this. So that's those conditions can be to a large extent created by the drive of these young and highly trained people who are pushing forward, trying to make their dreams come true. One thing that I would like to say is that I think the educational mind frame also needs to be adjusted. And here I would actually like to disagree with Professor Bletsas. I think it's a good thing for panelists to disagree also a little bit to create more interesting viewpoints. And indeed, I believe MIT does teach programming and computation. In fact, it has a very successful course called Introduction to Computer Science and Programming in Python. This is course 60001. And this course was so successful that many Harvard students were taking this course. So a few years ago, I decided to create a similar course for our Harvard students because I think it's really important. However, I want to make sure that what I'm trying to say is clear. I'm not talking about simple programming. I'm talking about highly sophisticated programming, trying to solve actual problems. And this is based not just in knowledge of programming language, but it's based also on deep understanding of mathematics and model building. And these are really important skills. And these are the kinds of things that only a very strong higher education program can deliver. And without this, we cannot inspire our young people to work on real problems, close to applications and close to market.
Professor Sifakis.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you here for a minute? I would like to revisit the educational component because it is very important in a minute. But before we do that, can we stay a little bit on the routes to market? Because I think establishing an innovation ecosystem, this is fundamental. And perhaps listening to the conversation in this panel and the panel before, there might be an action, okay, that we can do or we can recommend that can be taken. Why can't we not invite people who have already done it? We have in the US, we have the likes of the Y Combinator, which is an incubator. There is other such examples in the US. There's examples like this in the UK. Bring them over to Greece and try to obtain their advice and see how we can establish these sort of structures involving universities, involving our tax system, our legal system, and so on, to come up with a framework that over the years, of course, it is not going to happen overnight, obviously, but if set a time frame, 10-year time frame, where we can establish the right kind of frameworks and the right kind of environment to see actually these happening instead of just theorizing and talking about them, just take some action and deliver. So this is the point I would like to explore just for the next couple of minutes, really, if we can, if there is a reaction from the panel. Professor Sifakis.
Yes, but we can prepare a vision, make proposals, but I think that the system should be receptive somehow, and they should understand what the problem is.
Absolutely.
And they should collaborate. So the problem is, and this is a problem I was facing for 2 years as the president of this committee, that they don't even understand what the innovation is about. And I don't think that we have to invent something new. Just follow what other people have been doing now for decades. Okay, so just look at what happened in Portugal, in Ireland, in Barcelona, in Israel, of course. Okay, I mean, you don't have to invent anything new. Okay, of course, education in Greece is declining. And this is a very serious concept for the future because our ranking in international competitions is very bad. This is a well-known fact. And nobody cares about that, okay? And also, in any developed country, you have a program, you have a vision. You say there are priorities. In Greece, we should have priorities. We cannot be excellent in everything. So we should build on assets we have, and we should have a vision. So there are obvious things to be done in Greece, obvious assets on which we can try to build. For instance, defense is, we are spending a lot of money on defense. We spend more than 2.5% of the GDP, okay? So perhaps there is some money to mobilize. I mean, Turkey has mentioned implicitly at least, okay? I think other countries have developed their defense research and technology. We have not done anything in that direction. And there are other areas. There are shipbuilding, for instance, pharmaceuticals, and the food industry. Okay, so there are areas, but this means that, and I will finish on that, that the government, the authorities, mobilize all the players, give the incentives. So the incentives to industry, to universities, to research institutions to collaborate and create something that is that will be self-sustained. Because of course, if we have just 20 startups, something like that, this is not sustainable. Okay, perhaps the startups can be bought by somebody or can leave, etc. We need some stable structure to create innovation in Greece, and of course we have the models. So it's a matter of political willingness. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, absolutely, I agree. There is the top-down approach, which you just mentioned, actually, which is of course important. But then Professor Kaxiras and Professor Bertsimas actually alluded to the top-down approach. So ourselves as a community, bottom up, yeah. Ourselves as a community, actually, to put these proposals forward in collaboration with the government and key decision makers in that space to actually come up with something that is really actionable instead of just one side waiting for the other to do something. Because I am sure colleagues from government, they will say exactly the opposite. Come back to us with proposals and we will look at them and we will do it, perhaps. So, okay, I think it was Michail first and then Dimitris.
So Professor Sifakis stole my thunder a little bit, but yes, it's hard to expect. We have to be realistic, and it's hard to expect from professional politicians not to put their own survival first. Professional politicians like to make agencies, like to create new agencies. Greece has, a space agency that Professor Krimizis headed for a little bit. It doesn't have a DARPA. We are among the top NATO countries in expenditure, in defense expenditures. We used to have good research and development centers within the armed forces. I had a Professor Traganitis, in the electrical engineering department in Thessaloniki, who was a genius, who came out of Yeten. We don't have it anymore. But we do have a space agency. So we don't have the priorities straight, and that's an easy, a low-hanging fruit, because within that defense budget, there is a lot of things that we can do, autonomous vehicles, for example. I will go to another a lot more concrete suggestion here. We are in the process of creating an AI research center in Greece. AI these days should be called augmented intelligence. It's about machine learning. One of the great promises of augmented intelligence is the applications in the health sector. We don't have a unified medical records, electronic health record system in Greece. So this is what Kyriakos Periorakakis should be addressing next. This is a very concrete, not a very easy problem, but an problem that has been addressed successfully in many other countries. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. But as Greeks, we have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So it's a hard thing, but this is what the government should be doing. We have a national health system. It's one of the nice things about the country. Let's build upon that. It will help the national health system become a lot more effective, and it will help R&D too.
Okay, thanks very much. Dimitris.
I would like to go back to the United States of the 1950s, when the National Science Foundation was established. I have actually read quite carefully some of the documents that led to the establishment, and it was really very few people that convinced the then president to establish that and develop and give to the foundation a significant percentage of money in terms of the overall wealth of the country. Something like this can happen in Greece. It does need the political willingness, which is not always present. in my opinion, investment in research and investment, because research, in addition to basic knowledge, can also generate wealth for the country, as it has been proven time and time again in the last 70 years. But it requires, in my opinion, from the bottom-up aspect, from the from the top to bottom, it requires the willingness of several of the parties to recognize that investment is like this is a national is for the national good, not for the party or for so forth. I would then think, and I believe my understanding is that the prime minister of the country and the ministers of development are, I would say, open to proposals. I think people like us with some experience, we could perhaps propose something. The system that the diaspora organization that Efthimios has discussed, the Hellenic Institute of Advanced Studies, could perhaps help other organizations as well. But that's one method to which all of us agree, and I'm certain all of us are willing to help. But the other, do not underestimate the bottom up, because even though it might not lead to immediate, it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
And I would say both are needed. I don't say that one is stronger than the other. And finally, something to Professor Sifakis' comment about big companies. Big companies would come when they see benefits.
That's right.
We are too early at the moment.
That's right.
Microsoft and Google and others and Amazon have big offices in near the major universities of Israel. We need some time on that, but I think this is a later part of our development, even though a very important one. I don't want to, but I would say it's a combination of things.
Absolutely. Okay, these are brilliant points. So just to summarize a little bit where we are at the moment, and I'm very conscious of time. So there is definitely merit to the top-down approach, government directing and having the willingness. There is absolutely a necessity in the view of at least some panel speakers from the bottom-up approach, where the community actually requires or puts the requirements forward and try to establish actionable plans and visions for the future. And of course, the other key point that has emerged, which is really, instead of just saying, let's do AI, let's do biotech, let's do this and that, let's just focus on what Greece is actually spending its money on and what the requirements are. For example, military, food, and of course taking into account the capability of the scientific human capital of the country, and focus priorities around those. Now, I would like to proceed before we close on another topic, which is
just a quick interruption. So yeah, it's very unfortunate that we have limited time, so we have only 10 minutes. And just before we finish, I want also to add that there is a person that wants to be invited on stage for a short comment. So when you're ready, you can tell me. It's Mr. Dimitrios Karponis. So
okay,
please
Chrysoula. Okay, well, absolutely. So let's spend the next 2-3 minutes on this important point, which is what education in the 21st century for Greece would look like, and in particular, not necessarily the formal university education only, but also continued professional education before people leave after people leave the university. And I would like to invite Professor Kaxiras and Professor Bletsas to comment on this. Let's spend the next 3 minutes on that before we open the floor to the other speakers who want to join in.
Yeah, thank you. I think these types of programs that are flexible and they adjust with the evolution of the technology are very, very important. In fact, I've put a lot of effort in creating these types of master's degrees programs which serve the purpose that you just mentioned. So the type of continuous education for people who have already taken a degree a few years ago and they would want to be retrained. And this can be done relatively easily. This is one of the things that Greece can excel in, because it doesn't need any huge infrastructure. The potential is there. The key elements, there are good institutions that can handle these programs. But as I mentioned earlier, I think even in this respect, there are roadblocks put toward these efforts, in front of these efforts, by the legal system. This has to be changed very dramatically and very fast, because we cannot have these kinds of programs in Greek, for example. They have to be in English. And
Absolutely.
They have to be able to attract talent from around the world, both for teaching on a relatively short time scale, but also students from all around the world. These things,
Absolutely.
if you try to do these things now in Greece, I think you'll find a lot of obstacles and no help. So we should be aiming toward these goals, and we should be making it very clear what are the conditions for these goals to succeed, which from the objective point of view is easy, but for the practical point of view is not.
Absolutely. That's a very important point. There are some early examples. Some British universities have been able to do that in Greece, and I was part of it. And I'm sure, Efthimios, you have other examples. Dimitris, do you wish to follow up on this point?
Yeah, very briefly, and I think Michail mentioned it. I would like to mention that there is something very significant happening in education these days. The field of artificial intelligence has entered in many fields, so much so, but at least a university that both Michail and I are created a new school after 70 years. The last one was 70 years ago. And what is the idea that I think can have a material impact in Greece? That many fields can be revisited using AI technology, weather prediction, earthquake prediction, medicine, not the traditional law. So this is an opportunity where the tradition, you don't need a gigantic number of laboratories and so forth. You need high quality people, well trained. So I would recommend to the Greek universities to consider having a very significant investment in AI, even creating new environments, perhaps utilizing some of the diaspora talent on the matter. And down the road, this could lead to new companies, new ideas that could affect Greek society.
Absolutely. Fantastic points. Thanks very much, Dimitris. Chris, can we please invite the external speaker to join the panel?
Yes, of course. Dimitri Korpakis, Mr. Dimitri Korpakis, you can go ahead.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate briefly in your talk. I agree with everything that has been said until now. It's a very complex discussion. And let me, first of all, present myself. I have been working in the European Commission for the last 26 years in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation in the Framework Program. So I have seen a lot of rounds of efforts for, I would say, modernization of European innovation systems, also in connection with European cohesion policy. And you know that there is a connection with the European structural funds and the European Framework Program for Research and Innovation. But the real question that we have left out of the table is the question of place. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. So several times you have mentioned Israel, for example, and I would like to stress what Professor Sifakis, whom I met some years ago in Brussels, and we have discussed on it, it needs the prerequisites of the place. So in Greece, we have not been able to develop a real place-based innovation. So because you cannot push innovation from the top. So you can do whatever you want with laws and councils, and a lot of professors have been put into the task. But the question is that if you don't really have the market for these efforts, and in Greece, as you know, companies do not really create any demand for innovation. They are not ambitious. Yeah. They have a very low demand, and this creates a vicious circle. So Professor Sifakis also has touched the question of priorities, and this is something that we have seen taking center stage with the new plan for Greece into the new recovery and resilience facility that the European Union has put forward. And we have a program for this. We have a method in the Union which has been in place since the early 2010, which is smart specialization. And it has been slowly working also in Greece. A lot of similar countries in our size, for example, Denmark, Ireland, Belgium, Portugal, who was mentioned several times, have been applying these principles quite effectively. And if I can give you examples of Spanish regions, for example, that have been extremely successful in areas where they have gone completely out of their borders. You all know, for example, a multinational called Zara, who is a
I'm very
Spanish
sorry again for
company
interrupting.
coming from Galicia. So I'm finishing here,
Yes,
and I will say
yes.
that everything has been, everything you said is true, but you cannot push innovation in a top-down matter, and we cannot, of course, transfer Silicon Valley in an environment like Greece. Thank you.
Okay, I think, Chris, I think we're ready to summarize, if I'm not wrong. Okay, very quickly, thanks very much to Dimitris. I think he raised brilliant points. There has to be appetite to absorb innovation, of course. So there has to be, the market has to be there. This is absolutely true. But then I would argue that still certain structural changes have to take place in certain key areas, such as legal frameworks, legal systems, taxation systems, and so on. So there is the bottom-up approach, definitely. There is also a place for the top-down, and they all have to come together. I'm very pleased to hear that there are some frameworks by the European Union that have found their way into practice in Greece. That is absolutely brilliant news. And okay, I am aware we have covered a lot of important topics. This is a very big and complex area. I very much hope in a future event like this one, and maybe perhaps a face-to-face event, we can carry on the debate. I would like to thank all the speakers. I would like to thank the hosts for inviting me, giving the opportunity to do this. And I think we should be ready to close the session by thanking everybody who has attended. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Makatsoris. This would not have been possible without your stimulating questions. And thank you, of course, to our excellent panelists individually, Professor Sifakis for defining centers for excellence and highlighting the need for regional centers for excellence, Mr. Bletsas for highlighting the need to improve education in order to drive a 5.0 ecosystem and the distinction between education and professional training, Professor Kaxiras, thank you for raising awareness on the legal system, an important dimension to achieving Innovation Society 5.0, and Professor Bertsimas for bringing a live example to the discussion, the MIT engine, and sharing insights from your entrepreneurial experience. It really pains me to draw this session to a close. It has been an excellent holistic discussion, and I wish we had more time, but thank you everyone once again. It's time for a very short break before we move on to our third panel. Stay tuned.
Bye, everyone.